Ohai. Spain, the transcontinental sovereign state in southern Europe, the having part of territories in Africa. Member of the European Union and NATO. Spain borrows. Is she part? 80%. Of the Iberian Peninsula and also Canary and Balearic Islands, has the total area of 504,782 km. Together with small sovereign territories on the African coast, the cities of Ceuta and Melilla, being the fourth largest country in Europe, after Russia, Ukraine and France, has overland borders with 5 countries. Portugal in the west of the Iberian Peninsula, the British possession Gibraltar in the south of the Iberian Peninsula, Morocco in North Africa, semi-enclaves Ceuta, Melilla and Peñón Vélez La Homer, France in the north, Andorra in the north. It is washed by the Atlantic Ocean in the north and the west, the Mediterranean Sea in the south and the east. Average height of a surface of Spain -650 m above sea level. It is one of the most mountainous countries of Europe. The territory is divided into 17 autonomous communities and 2 autonomous cities. The capital, Madrid. Within centuries there was a set of hypotheses concerning etymology of the name Spain. It is considered that it comes from the Roman toponym of Hispania, which origin remains not up to the end found out, though it is documented that Phoenicians and Carthaginians called the region of Spania. Therefore the most widespread version of etymology is Semitic Phoenician. On the southwest coast of Iberia in a Bronze Age there is culture of which at the end of the 3rd millennium the civilization of Tartus trading in metal with Phoenicians is formed BB. After exhaustion of mines Tartus falls into decay. Along east coast of Spain in the 2nd millennium Iberski tribes appeared BB. Some hypotheses connect their ancestral home with North Africa. Further, Iber were assimilated by Celts. From Iber there is an ancient name of the peninsula, Iberian. Spain, the earth of Iber, was called by Phoenicians. In the middle of the 2nd millennium BB, Iber began to be settled in the strengthened villages in the territory of modern Castile. Ibera were engaged generally in agriculture, cattle breeding and hunting, were able to produce instruments of labor from copper and bronze. Ibera used the Polyvananski letter created earlier by Tartessians. Language of Iber wasn't related to Tartessiski. In a late Bronze Age the culture of fields of funeral ballot boxes, which rest during the historical period, were probably Lusitania. Gets into Iberia, and at the beginning of the 1st millennium BB the most part of Iberia is colonized by the Celtic tribes. A part of Celts living in the neighborhood with Iber having got under their influence, I created Celtiberiski culture. The Celts living in the western part kept rather conservative way of life, were unwritten. Celts of Iberia became famous as soldiers. They invented the 2-edged sword, which subsequently became standard arms of the Roman army, and used the minding inventors. During the Second Punic War, between 210 and 205 years BB, the extending Roman Empire occupied Carthago colonies in the Mediterranean Sea. On conquest by Rome of Spain nearly 2 centuries left, and then throughout about 6 centuries Spain was a part of the Roman Empire. Emperors Adrian, Trajan, Theodosius I and also the philosopher Seneca were born in the Roman Spain. The Christianity got to Spain in the 1st century AD and became popular in the cities in the 2nd century. Weakening of the Roman jurisdiction in Spain began in 409 when the German tribes of Suev and Vandals together with the Sarmatian tribes of Al-Anami entered on the peninsula with a permission of the Roman usurper. Suev founded the state in modern Galicia and northern Portugal, and Vandals were based on the south of Spain by 420, passed into North Africa in 429 and captured Carthage in 439. Visigoths get on the Iberian Peninsula in 414, 415 years under Ataulf's leadership, and further settled almost across all Spain. After fall of the Western Roman Empire, the kingdom of Visigoths finds full independence. Visigoths, as well as other Gothic tribes, professed Arianism. However, an overwhelming part of the population of Spain was made by the descendants of Romans professing Orthodox Christianity. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian Valichi considered a duty to restore the Roman Empire in former borders under the principle, one state, one belief, one law. As a result of Vandal war, the kingdom of Vandals was broken and included in structure of the Roman Empire up to Ceuta. In the spring 552 years, Justinian sends an expedition to Spain and wins the south of Spain, which became province of Spania, from Visigoths. However, Byzantium wasn't able to send troops to Spain, and the Vestgotsky king Leovigild returned the most part of gains. Vestgotsky kings of Sisput and his son Svantila expelled Byzantines from the peninsula. At the king Leovigild, under the influence of his boss Bozbinta in 580, the first last Arian cathedral as opposed to ecumenical councils, as a result of which persecutions of Visigoths of Arians on Orthodox Christians began, was carried out to Toledo. However, in 589 and at the king record by results of the Third Toledo Cathedral, Visigoths passed into Orthodox Christianity because of what subsequently lost Gothic language in which Arian liturgies were carried out. Also, the Third Toledo Cathedral obliged Jews to release slaves to Christians. The Third Toledo Cathedral allowed to unite society, and Gotha and Romans began to practice one religion and began to speak Latin. In 711 in Gibraltar, troops Tariq ibn Ziyad Umayyad of the Caliphate land. For the short period the Umayyad Caliphate occupied the large territory of Spain, and the state of Visigoths is broken. By 714 Moors established control over the most part of the peninsula. In 717, began attack on the south of France, and in 719, reached Toulouse. In the territory of Spain were founded Al-Andalus, and then in 756 the Cordoba Emirate. Cordoba becomes one of the largest cities of the world, the important cultural, scientific and economic center. In the 9th century in Cordoba, the palace city Medina of Az-Zahra is under construction. Together with the arrival of Muslims to Spain, dawn of the Jewish culture begins. The first and significant victory of Christians was won in 718 at Covedonge, that considers Reconquista's beginning, reconquest by Spaniards and Portuguese of the Iberian Peninsula at Muslims. The Battle of Poitiers in 732 in France prevented further distribution of Islam in Europe. However, real pushing off of Muslims from Spain took several centuries and was complete only when falling the Granada Emirate in 1492. There are Roman certificates that early Ligure lived in Spain, however during the historical period their existence isn't known. Reconquistas and an association of kingdoms Aragon and Castile in 1492 served as the beginning of the Spanish Empire. Same year Christopher Columbus made the first expedition to America, which became the beginning of the Spanish colonization of America, which had mainly men's type. Men who married local women of Indian or African origin moved to new lands. Spain became the pioneer of colonization, having begun to colonize America before other European states. At the same time, the Mediterranean cities of Spain practically became deserted from this that couldn't resist to Berber pirates. Spain became the first global empire, owning huge territories on different continents. Colonization of America had as well religious character. While in Europe the conflict between Catholics and Protestants stormed, natives of America were converted to Catholic Christianity. As Spaniards were shocked with customs of human sacrifices at the Maya, Aztec and Inca, the decision was made by military force to evangelize Revat natives who wallowed in a sin. Spaniards occupied huge territories: Mexico, Philippines, New Andalusia, Chile, Peru, and many others. Spain began to call the empire over which the sun never sits down. The period Spanish Habsburg is called the Golden Age of Spain. After the termination of board of a dynasty Habsburg in Spain, war for the Spanish inheritance began. By the 19th century, the decline of the Spanish Empire begins. The War of Independence of the Spanish colonies in America begins. In 1923, military dictatorship of the General Miguel Primo de Rivera was established. The king already during this period didn't possess any power in the country. In January 1930, after loss of support in army, without having managed to improve a situation after the acute economic crisis of last year, the dictator leaves the country. On April 14, 1931, I left the country, but the last from Bourbons didn't abdicate. Alfonso XIII, the parties supporting him, suffered crushing defeat on municipal elections. The government was created by adherents of change of a system. Suñeto Alcalá Zamora Torres became the first Prime Minister of the Republic Spain. So the Republican period began. The radical policy of the new government in relation to landowners, church, armies, extreme liberalism to separatists to the adjusted regions of the north and east met wholehearted support of one part of the population and burning feeling of hatred at another. Local revolts replaced each other. Despite all radical measures, for 2 years the government didn't achieve any achievements in economy. On elections in November 1933, conservatives returned to the government. Reforms were stopped. Now through the whole country their opponents, liberals and anarchists, began to carry out riots and mutinies already. On the following elections in January 1936, again as in 1931, radicals, Popular Front, with participation of the Communist Party won. The new structure of Cortes. Parliament of Spain. Resumed implementation of radical policy, hoping to begin to solve extreme measures the deepest problems in national economy. In July of the same year, conservative generals led by H. Sanker lifted well-prepared mutiny. In the very first days of the revolt, after the death of the old leader in plane crash F. Franco became the new head of a plot. Nationalists asked for the help Germany and Italy, communists received the help from the USSR and many left-wing parties of Europe and the world. Civil war began. Republicans in the zone expropriated the earth, the enterprises, banks, organized prosecutions of priests and monks. In the nationalist territory, all traditional institutes were restored, the power concentrated in Franco's hands. The front of the armed opposition was stretched through the whole country. For 3 years of slow victorious advance in fights, all provinces supporting Republicans were won. From the first to the last week's wars in a siege, there was a capital, Madrid. This year Spain was the main diplomatic problem of all developed countries of the world. In 1939, after the victory of military dictatorship was widespread all over the country, political parties were banned, except the fascist phalanx supporting Franco. Spain observed a neutrality during World War II, though sent a voluntary Blue Division to East Front. In 1947, Spain again was announced by the kingdom. However, the throne remained unoccupied at Regency of the Caudillo Franco. In November 1975, after Franco's death, the king proclaimed Juan Carlos I, who appointed in July 1976 a Suarez as prime minister. Dismantling of the fascist mode and democratic transformations began. In October 1977, the main political forces of the country signed the so-called Pact of Moncloa, by the name of the residence of the government in Madrid, which provided a set of measures in the field of policy and economy on completion of transition of the country to democracy. The pact provided parliamentary control over Massachusetts media, reorganization of security forces, liberalization of the legislation on meetings and meetings, democratization of a social security system and education, carrying out tax reform, etc. The Pact of Moncloa became a classical example of a compromise between various parties on the basis of national consensus for realization of the general tasks in transitional society. In December 1978, the new constitution came into force. In 1986, Spain entered into the European Union. The Basque Country and Catalonia under the Constitution in 1978 received considerable autonomy, but in them still there are also separatist movements. The Basque ETA terrorist organization differs in special reconcilability. In March 2004 in Madrid at the railway station, 13 explosions, as a result of which it was killed 191 took place and 50 people were wounded. Terrorist attack was organized by Islamists. Explosions occurred 3 days before the parliamentary elections, loss on elections of the People's Party led by the Prime Minister Aznar, who sent the Spanish troops in support of the USA and Great Britain in Iraq unilaterally without coordination with Parliament, turned out to be on March 14, 2004. Consequence of what? At the beginning of 2004, the new socialist government of José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero made an abrupt turn in foreign policy of Spain. From support of a course of the USA to solidarity with the majority of the European Union countries. After the victory on elections on March 14, 2004, the socialist government disengaged the Spanish troops from Iraq, having implemented thus important clause of the election program of the Spanish Socialist Labour Party. SALP. In 2005 in Spain, same-sex marriages were legalized. Thus, Spain became the third state in the world, after the Netherlands and Belgium, recognized legal equality of the marriage unions irrespective of a sex of spouses. On March 9, 2008 there took place parliamentary elections in Spain. On elections, the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party won a victory. According to results of elections, the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party received 168 seats in parliament. Her main rival, the Conservative People's Party, received 154 places. The remaining places, all in parliament of 350 places, divided among themselves 8 more parties, generally regional. Communists and Green, of the Joint Left coalition, reduced the presence at parliament from 5 to 3 deputies. 75% of voters took part in elections on which candidates of 92 parties stood. On November 20, 2011 there took place early parliamentary elections where the People's Party led by M. Rajoy won, having received 186 of 350 seats in the lower house. In December, Rajoy entered a position of the Prime Minister of Spain. A main goal of the new government, removal of Spain from long financial crisis. One of problems of modern Spain is the immigration problem. Generally to Spain there come residents of the countries of Maghreb and Latin America. At the beginning of a new century in new countries, by approximate calculations there were 2.5 million Latin Americans, from whom 800,000 were in Spain. However, after terrorist attacks of 2004 the attitude of Spaniards towards immigrants was considerably changed. Relief of Spain mainly mountain. The center of the country is at distance of 300 km from the sea. In a relief the dominating role is played by the systems of ridges and mountain plateaus. Plateaus and mountains make about 90% of her territory. Nearly a half of a surface of the country is occupied extensive, by the biggest in Europe, high, with average height of 660 m, Plateau Meseta. It differs in alternation of the plateau, folded and clumpy ridges and mountain hollows. The Cordillera Central divides them into 2 parts, northern and southern. In the north to the powerful Cantabrian Mountains, which were stretched along the coast of the Bay of Biscay on 600 km border, isolating internal areas from influence of the sea. In their central part there is a massif of Picos de Europa, from Spanish peaks of Europe, with heights to 2648 m. These mountains of the alpine type are put generally by deposits of the Carboniferous period, limestones, quartzites, sandstones. The Cantabrian Mountains, orographical and tectonic continuation of the most powerful mountain system of Spain, the Pyrenees. The Pyrenees represent several parallel ridges which are stretched from the west on the east on 450 km. It is one of the most remote highlands of Europe. Though on average their height isn't really big, a little more than 2500 m. They have only several conveniently located passes. All passes are at the height of 1500–2000 m. Therefore only 4 railroads go from Spain to France. 2 of them bypass the Pyrenees on the coast from the northwest and the southeast, and 2 more railroads cross the Pyrenees on ARB's sites, Oloron, Saint-Marie and Ripoll, Prades, through the system of tunnels. The widest and high part of mountains central. There is their main top, Pico Dianato, reaching 3404 m. From the northeast, Meseta is adjoined by the system of the Iberian Mountains, which highest point is the peak San Miguel in the massif of Moncayo, having on different sources, height from 2314 to 2316 m. Between East Pires and the Iberian Mountains, low Catalan Mountains, which southern slopes ledges break to the Mediterranean Sea, are stretched. Catalan Mountains. Average height of 900-1200 m, top Mount Caro, 1447 m. Followed throughout 400 km almost parallel to the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and actually isolate from the Aragonese Plateau. The sites of coastal plains developed in Murcia, Valencia and Catalonia to the north from the Cape Palos to border with France differ in high fertility. All southeast of the Iberian Peninsula is occupied Cordillera Robutica, representing the system of massifs and ridges. Its our crystal axis serve mountain Sierra Nevada. On height they concede in Europe only to the Alps. Their top, Mount Mulhacén, reaching 3478 m, the highest point of peninsular Spain. However, the highest mountain top of Spain is on the island of Tenerife, Canary Islands. It is a volcano of tide which height reaches 3718 m. The most part of the territory of Spain is located at the height about 700 m above sea level. It is the second highest country in Europe after Switzerland. The only large lowland, Andalusian, is located in the south of the country. In the northeast of Spain, in the valley of the Ebro River, the Aragonese plain was stretched. The smaller sizes of the lowland last along the Mediterranean Sea. On the Andalusian lowland, one of the main rivers of Spain, and only navigable in the lower current, Guadalquivir flows. Other rivers, including the largest, Tajo and Douro, which lower reaches are located in the territory of the neighboring Portugal, Ebro, Guadiana, differ in sharp seasonal fluctuations of level and a rapids current. Considerable territories of the country suffer from a lack of water. The deflation problem also is connected with it. It is annually blown millions of tons of a topsoil. The capital of Spain, Madrid, is located in the geographical center of the country and is the highest capital of Europe. On the coast of Spain there are more than 2,000 beaches. Costa Brava, Costa Giltite, Costa del Azar, Costa de Almeria, Costa Blanca, Marmana, Costa del Sol, Costa de la Luz, Rias Bajas, Rias Altas, Costa Cantabrica, Canary and Balearic Islands. Spain is one of the warmest states in southern Europe. The average number of sunny days is 285. Average annual temperature on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea is +20 C. In the winter, temperature falls below zero, usually only in the central and northern regions of the country. In the summer, temperature rises up to +40 C and above, from the central part to the southern coast. On the northern coast, not so high temperature, about +25 C. Very deep internal climatic distinctions are characteristic of Spain, and it only conditionally can be entirely carried to the Mediterranean climatic region. These distinctions are shown both in temperature and in the annual sums and the mode of rainfall. In the extreme northwest, climate soft and damp with weak fluctuations of temperature within a year and a large amount of rainfall. Constant winds from Atlantic bring a lot of moisture, mainly in the winter when foggy and cloudy weather with drizzles, almost without frosts and snow dominates. Average temperature of the coldest month same, as well as in the northwest of France. The summer hot and damp, average temperature rare is below +16 C. The annual amount of precipitation exceeds 1017, and places reaches 2000. Absolutely other conditions in internal parts of the country, on the plateau of Old and Newcastle and the Aragonese Plain. In these areas, influence of a Pluscogorno-Kotlevini relief, considerable height and local continental air effects. The low rainfall, no more than 500 mm a year, and sharp fluctuations of temperature on seasons is characteristic of them relatively. In Oldcastle and on the Aragonese Plain there are quite cold winters to frosts and strong, biting winds. Some are hot and quite dry, though the maximum of rainfall fall on this season of year. In Newcastle the climate is a little softer, with warmer winter but also with a low rainfall. Agriculture in all these areas needs artificial irrigation. The climate of Spain represents various set of climatic zones. The prevailing climate is Mediterranean, which differs in poor rainfall and is divided into three types: Mediterranean Sea, Mediterranean Continental and Droughty. The Mediterranean Sea occupies the Mediterranean coast, except in the southeast, South Atlantic, the Balearic Archipelago, Ceuta and Melilla. Average temperatures vary between 13 and 16 C. In the summer temperature rises up to 22 C, because of influence of the sea not too hot. Temperature doesn't fall below 10 C in the winter. The Mediterranean Continental covers an internal part of the peninsula, except an average zone of the Valley of Ebro. It is characterized by the isolation from sea influence, as gives to this climatic type continental character. On thermal characteristics allocate three subtypes of continental Mediterranean climate. Subtype of a northern submeseta and Teruel and Cuencas Heights. Represents cool summer, temperature below 22 C, and cold winter. Average temperature of the coldest month between 6 and 3 C. Subtype of the southern submeseta and the line of the partition of the Valley of Ebro with hot summer. Temperature is more than 22 C. And in the cold winter. Extremadura's subtype and the central Andalusia with very hot summer and in the moderate winter. 6-10 C, the coldest month. Mediterranean Droughty steppe occupies the southeast of the peninsula and an average zone of the Valley of Ebro. Average annual rainfall is lower than 300, as defines this climate as steppe. Temperatures can differ between the warm steppe of a coastal zone of the southeast. Average temperature of 17-18 C and in the winter below 10 C don't fall. And the cold steppe of an internal part the southeast with average temperatures no more than 17 C in the summer, in the winter between 3 and 8 C. In the northwest of Spain, on seaside plains and Navatreni slopes of mountains, brown forest soils are developed. Internal regions of the country, Old and New Castle, the Iberian Mountains and the Aragonese Plateau, are characterized by brown soils. In the areas rich with limestone, the terre d'eau, the alluvial soil meets. In the driest treeless areas, low-power carbonate gray-brown soils with sites of saline soils in relief depressions are presented. In arid landscapes of Murcia, gray soils are developed. They aren't gypsiferous and aren't salted. At irrigation, yield big crops of fruit and other crops. The Azlobanisty soils on flat alluvial plains, especially favorable for cultivation of rice, are allocated. A variety of climatic conditions, from damp in the north to arid in the south, causes heterogeneity of flora and vegetation of Spain. In the north, lines of similarity to Central Europe, and in the south, with Africa, are shown. Traces of forest vegetation in Murcia, La Mancha and Granada demonstrate that in the past a considerable part of the territory of Spain was Anobalina. However, now the woods and light forests occupy only 30% of the space of the country, and only 5% of the share of full-fledged closed forest stands. In the northwest of the country, the evergreen oak forests grow. In mountain forests there are more Listopadni species of oaks, along with a beech and ash tree, a birch and a chestnut that is typical for Central Europe. In the internal regions of Spain, the small massifs of dry evergreen forests with prevalence of an oak alternating with pine forests and bushes in places remained. In the most droughty areas of New Castle, the Aragonese Plateau and Murcia, fragments of semi-deserts meet, usually on saline soils. In those regions of the southern Spain where more rainfall drops out, especially along the coast, typical Mediterranean castanic cover grass communities of type of Agarriga and Tomilar are presented. For Agarriga, participation of local types of Aegianista and cornflowers is characteristic of a Tomilar, presence of an aromatic mint family. Shrubby species of thyme, rosemary, etc. And also a rock rose. A special kind of Agarriga is made by scattered thickets of a dwarfish fan palm tree, very characteristic of Andalusia, and also community with prevalence of a Hydrassin alpha, the hardy xerophyte giving strong fiber. In fauna of Spain, the Central European and African communications are obvious. Among the European types, two kinds of a brown bear. Large Asturian and smaller, black collar, meeting in the Pyrenees. A lynx, a wolf, a fox, a forest cat deserve a mention. Deer, hares, squirrels and moles meet. The eagle burial ground is found in Spain and North Africa, and meeting on the Iberian Peninsula Blue 40, it is found also in East Asia. On both sides of the Strait of Gibraltar genets, the Egyptian mongooses and one species of chameleons meet. Subsoil of Spain abounds with minerals. Reserves of metal ores, which fields are connected with exits of the folded basis of Meseta or with volcanic breeds of mountain constructions, are especially considerable. On the northwest outskirts of Meseta, within the Gallic Massif, in the Caledonian and Proterozoic granite intrusions, there are tin, tungsten and uranium ores. On the southern outskirts of Meseta, the strip of lead zinc silver fields was stretched. In the same place there is a large-scale deposit of mercury having world value, Almaden. Iron ores are available in the north and the south of Spain. They are dated for structures Mesozoic and Alpine magmatic cycles. These are the known fields of the district of Bilbao on the northern slope of Biscaysky Mountains and in Almeria on the southern slope of the Betsky Cordilleras. In the north, in the deposits of carbon fabrics filling a foothill depression of Asturian mountains, there is a coal field, largest in the country. Besides, small coal fields are on the southern slope of mountains and in some other areas. In Cainozoic deposits of intermountain and intramountain depressions, thicknesses of salts and brown coal lie. Considerable reserves of potash salts are located within the plain of Ebro. The majority of mineral deposits in the territory of the country have very modest sizes and are quite strongly exhausted, as well as many fields of other European regions that is Spain dependent on import of minerals, generally of North Africa. Statistics of population from 1960 to 2018. Age and sex pyramid of the population of Spain for 2021. Age and sex pyramids of the population of Spain in 2002-2021. The population of the Spanish origin is represented in color, foreign gray color. Dynamics of change of population. 1G-3 million people. 150G-7 million people. 500G-3 million people. 1006 million people. 1210 million people. 1314 million people. 1450 20 million people. 1811.6 million people. 1850 11.3 million people. 1918.6 million people. 1932 24.1 million people. 1959 29. 9 million people. 1977 36.3 million people. 2009 45.9 million people. 2011 46.7 million people. 2013 46.7 million people. 2014 46.5 million people. 2015 46.4 million people. 2016 45.9 million people. 2017 46.57 million people. 2018 46.72 million people. 2019 45.71 million people. 2020 47.5 million people. In Spain of modern times. 1492-1860. Negative natural increase was observed. In the 15-18 centuries across Spain was on average in 1.79 children on each family, at immigration in colony. The population of Spain as of 2020 according to data of Institute of the State Statistics. Instituto Nacional de Estadística. AN. Made 47,450,795 people. Among them 40,219,600 people were born in Spain, were born abroad of 72,31,195 people. From them 2,215,932 persons, in America 3,181,305 people, in Africa 1,303,159 people, in Asia, person, and Oceania of 86,27 people were born in Europe. As of 2021 the urban population makes 81.1%. Population density -94 people/km. Official language Spanish. In autonomous regions along with Castilian, Spanish. Also other languages are official. Catalan Valencian in Catalonia, Valencia and on Balearic Islands, Basque in the Basque Country and Navarre, Galician in Galicia, Aranese in Catalonia. A part of indigenous Spaniards speaks also the Aragonese, Extremadurski, Occitan languages which don't have the official status and on an adverb of a line of D. Chalem. Outside the country, over 2.7 million Spaniards, including live in the countries of North and South America of 1.7 million and Western Europe over 1 million. Mainly in France and Germany. As of 2020, 7.2 million immigrants, or 22% of the population of the country lived in Spain. The largest cities of Spain are Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, Seville, Zaragoza, Malaga, State language of Spain is the Spanish relating to Indo-European family of languages. Romance group, Ibero-Romance subgroup. Spain, the polyethnic country. Except Castilians, in Spain there live Catalans, Galicians, Basques, Occidenses, the Asturians, Aragonese speaking own languages. Respectively Catalan, Galician, Basque, Occitan, Asturian and Aragonese. The dialect of Catalan is spoken by Valencians. Officially it is considered Valencian. Catalan inhabitants of Balearic Islands also speak. During Franco's regime, ethnic minorities were exposed to violent assimilation, but despite it, languages of these people didn't disappear and endure the real revival in the last decades. However, the Aragonese language, in former times widespread, and now remained only in the few rural settlements, disappears. Strong assimilation was experienced by Basques in the province Navarre, but in the Basque country Basque has strong positions. Also Asturian revives. Versions of names depending on the area. Asturleonski, Asturian, Leon, Extremadurski, which meets in autonomous communities of Asturias, Castile Leon, Extremadura, Cantabria. Spain is the secular state which constitution guarantees freedom of worship. Most of the population profess Christianity and belongs to the Roman Catholic Church. 75%. The first Protestant communities in Spain arose in the 16th century, however were completely destroyed by the Spanish Inquisition. Protestants began a sermon in Spain in sulfurs again. The 19th century. At the moment 567,000 representatives of this direction of Christianity, the majority of whom Pentecostals, 312,000, live in the country. Since the end of the 19th century in the coastal cities of the country the Greek merchants professing orthodoxy settle. Due to Massachusetts labor migration from countries of Eastern Europe, the number of Orthodox Christians considerably grew up by the end of the 20th century. At the moment 900,000 Orthodox Christians live in Spain. Mainly Romanians, Bulgarians, Ukrainians, Greeks and Serbians. Since the end of the 19th century to Spain Muslims, first of all, workers from Morocco in large quantities move. In the second half of the 20th century, the flow of immigrants increases and includes refugees from other countries of North Africa. By 2010, in the country was already 1 million Muslims. Islamic leaders speak about 2 million Muslims. The prevailing direction of Islam is the Sunni Islam. The small but influential group in the country is represented by religious Jews. 15,000. Among migrants there are also Buddhists. 47,000. Hindus. 45,000. Sikhs, supporters of the Chinese national religion and Afro-Brazilian religion of Amicum. During lifetime of the last generation in Spain, the number of not religious people considerably grew up. Now non-believers are already 19% of the population of the country. According to some polls, the number of those are even higher. During the poll of the Center of Sociological Research's EASE in June 2015, 25.4% of respondents declared their irreligiousness. Among them 9.5% the convinced atheists and 15.9% non-believers. Administrative division of Spain is regulated by the Constitution and the current legislation. The main administrative and territorial unit in Spain is the autonomous community. Autonomous region. Now in the country there are 17 autonomous communities. At the same time, the Basque Country, Catalonia, Navarre, Galicia and Andalusia have expanded autonomies. Autonomous communities in turn are divided into 50 provinces. Also, as a part of Spain, there are two so-called autonomous cities in Africa, Ceuta and Melilla, and sovereign territories of Spain. Provinces are divided into comarca, which there is 324 now. In turn, a divided comarca into municipalities, which there are more than 8,000. Spain constitutional monarchy. The fundamental law of the state is the Constitution adopted in 1978. The head of state is the king, now Philip VI. Executive power is headed by the Prime Minister, the party leader, gathered a majority of votes at parliamentary elections. Legislature, two-chamber parliament, General Cortes. The Congress of Deputies and the Senate. Consists of the Senate. 259 places, some deputies are chosen direct universal suffrage, others are appointed by a legislature of provinces. All senators are elected for a 4-year term. And the Congress of Deputies, 350 places, are chosen according to party lists for a 4-year term. Body of the constitutional supervision, the Constitutional Court, the highest judicial authority, the Supreme Court, the highest judicial authorities of autonomous communities, the Supreme Courts of Justice, courts of the Court of Appeal, provincial audiencia, district courts, courts of first instance and the investigations, the lowest link of the judicial system, magistrates. Court for an impeachment, the National Audiencia, the supreme control body, calculating court, governing body of vessels, General Council of Judicial Authority. In total in Spain more than 500 political parties and public organizations are officially registered. After the parliamentary elections on December 20, 2015, Spain appeared in a situation of a cabinet crisis. The People's Party, which won first place, received 28 7% of votes and 123 seats in the Congress of Deputies, and the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party minus 22%. 90 places. It wasn't succeeded to create the government which would receive the majority in the Congress of Deputies. On June 26 in Spain, early parliamentary elections took place. The People's Party remained the largest, added a little and achieved 137 mandates, but it didn't allow her to create the government alone. From December 2015 to October 2016, Spain, the technical government, headed by the acting as the Prime Minister Rajoy, managed. On October 29, the Congress of Deputies in the second round of vote by the simple majority supported Rajoy's nomination for a post of the head of the government. The government of minority created by Rajoy relies on the smallest parliamentary support in the modern history of Spain. The preamble of the Constitution of Spain proclaims readiness to cooperate in strengthening of a peace relationship and cooperation with all countries of the world. Now, the foreign policy of Spain generally is based on three directions. Europe, in particular Ibero-American direction, countries of the Mediterranean Sea. Today Spain has diplomatic relations with all countries of the Union. Since recent times Spain has relations with Bhutan. Since October 2010. South Sudan. After his independence of Sudan in July 2011. And the state of Kiribati. Since September 2011. At the beginning of 2004, in connection with coming to power of the new socialist government of J50. Rodrigo Zapatero, there was an abrupt turn in foreign policy of Spain from support of a course of the USA to solidarity with leaders of the European Union, in particular, in the Iraqi question. After the victory on elections on March 14, 2004, the new socialist government disengaged the Spanish troops from Iraq. Spain, the largest of the European Union countries which didn't recognize independence of Kosovo because of similar own problems with Basques and Catalans. One of the most important directions of foreign policy of Spain is Latin America. However, now in an Ibero-American relationship there are also critical situations. Political life of Cuba became a basis of disagreements often. Aznar's government demanded carrying out democratic reforms on the island that led to F. Castro's refusal to attend the Ibero-American summits. Undoubtedly, good points in a relationship of two regions was more, and each of aspects of development is important for further cooperation. At the beginning of the 21st century, Spain assists the countries of this region in formation of civil society, democratic foundations, open and free trade, in the solution of social and economic problems. For achievement of these purposes, the Ibero-American Community of the Nations was created. The summits at which the major issues are resolved are annually held. On October 14, 15, 2005 in Salamanca anniversary, the 15th Ibero-American Summit took place. It was prepared by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain Miguel Angel Moratinos and the Secretariat of Ibero-American Cooperation. During the summit conferences on culture and education, tourism, a meeting of ministers of economics, a parliamentary forum, meetings on health care and development of agriculture were held. The summit drew to itself attention of world community. The Union Secretary General Kofi Annan, the President of the European Commission José Manuel Durão Barroso, the chairman of the European Parliament José Borrell and other eminent persons took part in his work. Specific problems were discussed at the summit. Economic development, immigration and Iberoamerica's role on the international scene. The Declaration of Salamanca became the final document of the summit. The document with an appeal to stop economic and trade blockade of Cuba and also to repeal the law of Helms-Burton became one of the major decisions. In recent years the given region is important, and in terms of participation in of the Spanish companies Repsol, Telefónica, Beva, Endesa, Iberdrola, Acciona and others. Not less important direction of foreign policy of Spain is the Mediterranean. The solution of problems in this region and preservation of friendship and contacts with the Mediterranean countries play an important role for Spain, therefore it is a question of its own safety. Besides, these countries adjoin to her and also are important trade partners. The important project in the field of the Spanish-Mediterranean dialogue is the Barcelonian process. The program intended for strengthening in the countries of the Mediterranean region of institutes of the state, development of economy, progress in social area, solutions of sensitive issues and problems of the region. Spain is known that it is the last country which ratified the protocol on the accession of Montenegro to NATO on May 10, 2017. In foreign policy of Spain, Morocco occupies one of key places for which the Moroccan Kingdom is the major African partner, at least owing to proximity. The main directions of the Spanish policy in Morocco are the questions connected with enclaves Ceuta and Melilla, an unresolved problem with Western Sahara, problems of illegal migration, questions of the termination of drug trafficking, etc. Most actively, a relationship between Spain and the countries of Maghreb after coming to power in Spain of Socialist Party in 1982 began to develop. At the government of the People's Party, headed by the Prime Minister J.M. Aznar, which were in power from 1996 to 2004, it was impossible to call a relationship good, and they were characterized rather by an instability, in particular the bright places taken by the conflict around the island of Perical in 2002. The socialists who came again to the power in April 2004, led by José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, had firm intention to improve a relationship with the neighbors and first of all with Morocco. After Mohammed VI and Juan Carlos's meeting in 2005, a relationship between two monarchs considerably improved. The conflict in Western Sahara, which arose for a long time, always had an adverse impact on a relationship between two countries. After the broken Quadrilateral Conference, Morocco in 1975 authorized a Green March to Western Sahara for the purpose of clarification of Western Sahara from Spain. The agreement between Spain, Mauritania and Morocco on transfer of temporary control over the Sahara of Morocco and Mauritania became a result. Compound a relationship of two countries, close economic relations are important. In 1995, the government of Morocco decides to put everything on foreign investors, the most important of whom are Spain and France. In 2007, Spain occupied, according to the IMF, on the level of economic development, the 8th place in the world. In 2014, the 14th place. Traditionally, Spain, the agricultural country, besides, is one of the biggest producers of Western Europe. From the middle of the 1950th years, industrial growth was fast and quickly reached bigger weight than agriculture in national economy. Development plans which implementation began in 1964 helped to expand economy. However, the period of economic downturn because of increase in prices for oil and increases in the import connected with the establishment of democracy and opening of borders in the late 70s began. Development of steel industry, development of shipyards, the textile industry increased. Income gained from tourism is also quite high. Since Spain since 1986 became the full member of the European Union, EU. The economic policy evolved depending on this supranational organization. In the 1990s the country came to the leading positions in the EU. Though still is a recipient that has received subsidies for support of agriculture in some areas from the All-European funds. There was a construction boom which inflated the soap bubble of the real estate market, which later developed into crisis. The global economic crisis mentioned in serious degree in Spain. Long-term excessive expenses of the state over income gave in a result, by the end of the ORD, to state budget deficit over 11% of GDP. The foreign trade deficiency of the country was 5% of total amount of economy. Unemployment began to exceed 25%. In the 2010, the recession in the Spanish economy, which began in the spring 2012, continued 1.5 years. By the end of 2014, national economy began to rise, and even most quicker in Europe. As in the neighboring Italy, in Spain the problem of smoothing of economic inequality between northern, more industrially developed, and the backward southern regions having high unemployment is particularly acute enough. DDD, $1.311 trillion. 2017. Gain during the period from 2017 to 2019 was 3.1%. For years of crisis since 2008 it was in total reduced by 9%. Large ports: Bilbao, Barcelona, Algeciras, Santa Cruz de Tenerife, Tarragona, Col, Pigeon. Spain, one of the largest centers of the international tourism. 81.8 million people in 2017. 1.3 million people are engaged in this sphere. The main tourist centers, Madrid and Barcelona, and also resorts, Costa Brava, Costa Guilty, Costa Blanca, Costa del Sol. 95% of tourists from EU countries. In national economy, strong positions are taken by the companies of the USA, France, Germany, Great Britain, Switzerland. It possesses more than 50% of the enterprises of mechanical engineering and metallurgy. About 40% of the share capital fall to the share of 8 largest Spanish financial and industrial and banking groups: Marchi, Ferro, Arquico, Carriage, Ruiz Mateos, etc. Since January 1, 2020, the minimum wage in Spain makes €11.08. As of 2016, the average amount of compensation in Spain is €21.89. The tax system in Spain combines federal, regional and municipal taxes. Income tax of the enterprises makes 25%. On April 5, 2020, it was reported about plans for introduction of unconditional basic income because of epidemic of COVID-19. The leading branch of agriculture, crop production, gives over 50% of cost of products. Grow up wheat, about 20% of acreage. barley, corn. In the central and southern regions of the country, rice. On the irrigated lands of the Mediterranean coast. Its productivity in Spain, one of the highest in the world. Potatoes and sugar beet, bean. Also vegetables. Occupy 60% of acreage. Tomatoes, onions, pepper, eggplants. Olives. The leading place on cultivation of olives in the world. A citrus and tobacco. In the south of the country grow up almonds. The leading place on export in Western Europe. Dates and a sugar cane. In Europe grow only in Spain. A fig, grenades, a cotton. Wine growing on the Mediterranean coast and in areas of Castilla-La Mancha, Extremadura. Successfully the livestock production develops. Goats and sheep are bred in droughty areas, and in the north, cattle. The original industry, preparation and export of pith bark. Spain is included into the top 10 of the countries of the world on a catch of fish, seafood and their processing, is the large exporter of fresh fish and fish canned food. Annually 20–25% of all catch-over work on canned food. The main part of trade is conducted at coast of Cantabria, the Basque Country and Galicia. Most of all catch sardines, a hake, mackerels, anchovies and a cod. The oldest industry, mining. A distinguished shipbuilding from branches of mechanical engineering. There is an automotive industry. Seat. Metalworking and production of the industrial equipment is developed. From branches of light industry have the greatest value the textile and tanning and shoe industry. 4% of world export of footwear fall to the share of Spain. In the food industry, winemaking, production of vegetable oil. Spain, the world leader in production of olive oil. Fruit and vegetable and fish canned food are allocated. In the fuel and energy complex. FEC. The problem is that, having some of the highest growth rates in the EU, Spain doesn't provide itself with energy independently and is depending on foreign exporters. The country imports 80% of the consumed energy carriers. Practically all gas and oil. Spain takes on energy carriers the 40th place in the world. Natural gas production in Spain provides less than 1% of needs of the country for gas fuel. The needs for gas almost completely become covered due to import deliveries. In domestic market of Spain, 29 companies are engaged in selling of gas. At the same time, the leading positions in the sector of gas supply and sales of gas to end users are kept by the Gas Natural Fenosa company and its regional branches. Extent of the distribution networks which are owned by the company is more than 45,000 km. Endesa, Iberdrola, Cepsa, Naturgas are also among the main gas distributing companies of Spain. Annual oil production makes about 30 million tons, and covers less than 10% of requirements. About 10% are the share of nuclear power, 6% for hydropower. Also, Spanish government pays much attention to alternative energy sources. 12%. Entering the 5 of the country's investors in alternative power engineering. In 2018, the government of Spain published the decision on full transition to green energy by 2050. Spain, one of the largest centers of the international tourism. The main tourist centers, Madrid and Barcelona, and also resorts, Costa Brava, Costa Giltide, Costa Blanca, Costa del Sol, the Canary Islands. 1.3 million people are engaged in this sphere. According to the statistics of World Tourism Organization of the Union on the international tourist traffic in 2017, Spain from 81.8 million visitors took the second place after France. The banking system of Spain is one of the stablest in Europe. It is possible to distinguish the following from her distinctive features. High degree of concentration of banking capital along with a small amount of credit institutions. 395. The considerable level of foreign currency reserves. Euro 13.9 billion. An extensive network of branches of private banks and the state savings banks. The dominating role is played by national banks with the 100% Spanish capital. The leader in the cost of market assets, Grupo Santander Financial Group, which was formed in 1999 as a result of merge of two large banks. Internationalization of national credit and financial institutes has a decisive influence on a position of Spain in the world economy. About a quarter of assets of a banking system of Spain is abroad, and 1/2 is the share of Latin America, and the second of the European countries. Two main Spanish banking groups, Santander and BBVA, treat the largest banks of the world. Financial crisis in Spain began to develop into political gradually. On the one hand, regions with the extremely weak banks need the help of the government of the country. From another, some territories, in particular Catalonia, consider that they without the leading and directing hand of Madrid would feel much more better. The Spanish road network, which is generally centralized with 6 highways, connecting Madrid to the Basque Country, Catalonia, Valencia, Andalusia, Extremadura and Galicia. Besides, high-speed motorways pass along the Atlantic and Mediterranean coasts. Extent of highways is 328,000 km. Fleet of vehicles, more than 19 million cars. On highways, 90% of passenger and 79% of cargo transportation are carried up. Spain intended to have 1 million electric vehicles by 2014 as a part of the plan of the government for economy of energy and to improvement of ecology. For the last 3 decades in Spain, modern transport infrastructure, and the companies which built it is created and serve, turned into the largest operators of this sphere of the world economy. 6 of 10 enterprises with the greatest number of concessions of transport infrastructure in the world Spanish. Ex Ferrovial, ex Abertis, Sacer, all. The Spanish technologies are applied in railway projects of Great Britain, the subways of Washington and Mexico, management of the airports of Sydney and Stockholm. Spain is the European leader of control systems of air transportation. The first railroad is constructed in 1848 and had extent about 30 km. This stage is acting also now, connecting Barcelona and the town of Mataró on the Mediterranean coast. Total length of a railway line in 2004 was km, from which by 8791 km it is electrified. In 2017, the total length of highways of Spain, about km, including 100 stations and more than 1500 km of the high-speed avenue lines. On an indicator of VSOM, Spain also the second takes the first place in Europe, after China. In the world, about Euro, annually go for service of 1 km of VSOM in Spain. There are railroads track width. Broad gauge 1668 of 11829 km. It is electrified on a direct current of 36950 km. Standard track 1435 of 998 km. All are electrified on alternating current of 25 kV. Narrow track 1040 of 1926 km. 815 km are electrified. Narrow track 914 of 28 km. All are electrified. By the railroads, about 6.5% of all freights of land transport and 6% of passengers are transported. Spain has more than 1500 km of the VSOM lines connecting Madrid with Malaga, Seville, Valencia, Barcelona, Valladolid, Tarragona, Zaragoza, Alicante, Ferrolina. In 2013, the line connecting Spain with VSOM of France is built. Night trains ply from Spain to Paris, Lisbon, Geneva, Zurich, Milan. If the ambitious program of the Spanish high-speed railway lines is executed, by 2020 Spain had to have 700 km of the high-speed railway lines. According to national practice, to them belong also lines with a speed of movement of 200-250 km/h. Allowing to reach from the province Madrid less than in 3 hours and Barcelona within 4 hours. The distance in 630 km from Madrid to Barcelona overcomes the high-speed train in 2 hours 38 minutes. Taking into account a tourist passenger traffic, it is the route which is most loaded in Spain. A big part of a railway system belongs to the state company, Administrador de Infraestructuras Ferroviarias de España. The movement is by rail regulated by public institution of Renfe. Also in this market the regional companies participate. PGG, Euskotren Egeviet CS. The problem of further financing of the Spanish railroads in the conditions of crisis and an insufficient passenger traffic which calls into question into expediency of investments is relevant. 20 million annual regular trips by high-speed, distant and night trains at the general passenger traffic of 200 million people a year. About 300 vessels with the general displacement of 1.511 million tons are involved in the marine transport. By vessels under the Spanish flags it is transported from 30 million tons of the foreign trade freights annually. 24 seaports control nearly 93% of all transportations. Spain was in the 4th place on the volume of freight transportation in the EU for 2010. Transportation of goods in containers made 112 million tons that brought Spain to the 1st place on this indicator. Along with the Netherlands, Belgium, Romania, Slovenia and Bulgaria, Spain is the country with a high share of transportations out of borders of the EU. In 2010 the Spanish ports of Algeciras and Valencia were included into the rating of 20 large ports of Europe by the sizes of the cargo tonnage. On volumes of tourist transportations, the rating included Algeciras Port and Palma de Mallorca Port. The important place is taken by air transport. From 41 airports operating in 2017, 34 make regular transportations. The airports of Spain are subordinated to public organization, Spanish Airports and Air Navigation, which is in turn subordinated to the Ministry of Development. According to the law on the autonomy of Catalonia of 2006, 3 Catalan airports were transferred to the jurisdiction of Generalitat of Catalonia, who manages them together with public organization Aerocat Estatuto de Autonomia. The airport of Madrid, with a passenger traffic of 50.8 million in 2008, one of the most loaded airports in the world. The airport of Barcelona served 30 million passengers in 2008. Less loaded airports are in Gran Canaria, Malaga, Valencia, Seville, Mallorca, Alicante and Bilbao. The Spanish airlines are Air Europa, Air Nostrum, Air Pulmonta, Binta Canarias, Iberia Lee, Islas Airways, Vueling Airlines. On November 2, 2004, the Prime Minister of Spain, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, announced the new Doctrine of National Defense of Spain 1/2004. The former military doctrine was accepted in December 2000 by José María Aznar's government. In particular, in it the great value was attached to readiness of the Spanish armed forces for the decision of the possible internal social or territorial conflicts. The army, according to the Spanish constitution, protects the country not only from external, but also from the internal enemy. Actions of army outside Spain were defined by her membership in NATO and transatlantic solidarity with the USA. Terrorism appears both external and internal in the new Doctrine 1/2004, main enemy of Spain. It is noted that from now on the Spanish troops will be able to participate in the international peacekeeping actions which are directly approved by the Union, or as was in Kosovo, enjoying obvious support of the international community. Besides, participation in military operations will require permission of Parliament of Spain. In the new military doctrine, the role of the General Staff of Defense of GEMAD, which is headed by the General Felix Sanz, is raised. At the end of October, the statement for need to counterbalance the unequal relationship between Spain and the USA, which developed after 1953, when Spain and the USA signed the military agreement on cooperation in the field of defense, under which the USA acquired the right to use in Spain several large military bases. In 2001, Spain cancelled a compulsory military service and completely passed to professional army. In Spain, there are no laws forbidding to open gays and lesbians to serve in armed forces. On March 4, 2009, the Minister of Defense of Spain, to the Carme of Chacons, the first woman on this post, issued the decree repealing earlier existing law which forbade transgender people to serve in armed forces. In the rating of military power taking into account for 2019, the Army of Spain takes the 20th place. After 2008, the share of immigrants among the Spanish offenders gradually increased. It is connected with strengthening of immigration to Spain, including illegal, from the countries of Africa and also from Latin America. Among the last two, gangs from Dominican Republic especially became more active. Dominicans don't play. Dominicans don't joke. and Trinitarios. Trinitaria, called so in honor of the underground organization, La Trinitaria, fighting for independence of Dominican Republic of Haiti in 1838. Drug traffic revenues are in Spain euro 15.7 million a day. 2014. In Spain, a system of compulsory free secondary education of the population aged from 6 up to 16 years works. At public schools about 70%, at the state universities -96.5% study. The largest universities of the country. The Madrid Autonomous University, to Complutense. In Madrid. Barcelona Central and Autonomous, Santiago de Compostela, the Polytechnical University in Valencia. Spain differs in high degree of ethnocultural diversity. Surreal influence of several religions, Islam, Christianity and also Judaism was the most important factors of development of local material and spiritual culture. The best-known museum of Spain, Prado, is in Madrid. In Spain there is still a set of the unique museums and galleries. Picasso's Museum and the National Museum of Art of Catalonia located in Barcelona, the National Museum of Sculpture in Valladolid, El Greco's and Museum to Toledo, the Museum Guggenheim to Bilbao, the Museum of the Spanish Abstract Art in Cuenca. The national holiday in Spain, Day of the Spanish Nation, is annually celebrated on October 12. Date of discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. The period of formation of the Spanish painting is the end of the first quarter of the 17th century when local schools actively develop. Seville, Valencia, Adar. And also on the Spanish Surrogate and actively methods of Caravagism adapt. The situation in which art of Spain developed in the Middle Ages was difficult. Originally on the Iberian Peninsula Visigoths governed, a branch of larger people it is ready. On their name this architectural style in the whole Europe is also called. The Spanish Gothic style has distinctive features. First, influence of Mauritian art. Secondly, her characteristic of her variety, despite common features. In the period of the 12th, 13th centuries there was a fight for return of the power against Moors. Reconquista. Before, in the 11th century, in Spain the Roman style dominated, and it was preceded by Asturian. Performance. Style. The Gothic style extended across Spain unevenly. In Castile works of a Gothic style appeared in the 13th century, in Catalonia, in the 14th, 15th centuries, and she got into Andalusia only in the second half of the 15th century. Also internal furniture of cathedrals differed from French. In the conditions of hot climate narrow windows became, and the twilight reigned inside. Where usually in cathedrals there was a chorus, here placed the chapel walled behind the altar and was placed his altarny image. In Catalonia there was the option of a Gothic style. Constructions in Catalonia differ in bigger spatial freedom, plan width, prevalence of quiet horizontal lines. Instead of sharp Gothic roofs, flat coverings on ledges. Architrave and buttresses don't come out, and are often hidden inside. In Spain there are 187 operating beacons. Abroad, the Spanish music is often associated only with a flamenco, the West Andalusian musical genre, which, however, is a little widespread outside this area. Among classical composers from Spain, there were such geniuses as Isaac Albeniz, Manuel de Falla, Enrique Granados. The most popular musical instrument is the guitar. Spain has a well-developed network of Massachusetts media. 137 newspapers and about 1,000 magazines are issued. The most readable daily newspapers: El País, El Mundo, La Vanguardia, ABS, El Periódico, Marca. Magazines for women of Patrones, Labores del Hogar, Moda. TV and radio broadcasting in Spain is divided into public and commercial. The public speaker art includes the first and second TV channels, La 1 and La, and 4 radio stations: Radio Nacional, Radio Clásica, Radio Free, Radio. Commercial speakers: Antena 3, Cuatro, Telecinco and La Sexta. Depending on a form of distribution of a signal, the television in Spain is divided into radio, cable, satellite and IPT. Broadcasting in Spain is presented only radio and internet broadcasting. Public radio stations can broadcast in the general multiplexes with public TV channels through radio, cable, satellite television and IPT. Radio broadcasting broadcasts in the analog standard in the range of very high frequency, and Radio Nacional, Serra and Cope, also in the range of average waves. Main type of sport in Spain is the soccer since the beginning of the 20th century. The basketball, tennis, cycling, handball, motorcycle sport, skateboarding and, recently, Formula 1 are also important thanks to presence of the Spanish champions at all these disciplines. Today Spain, the leading world sports power, development of sport in the country in particular pushed the Summer Olympic Games in Barcelona. In 2008 Spain won a victory in the European Football Championship, having won a final against German national team with the score 1-0. A goal on the account of the forward of Spaniards Fernando Torres. And in 2010 a victory on the FIFA World Cup in the final, having broken resistance of the national team of the Netherlands with the score 1-0. The decisive goal was issued several minutes prior to the end of the game by the Spanish midfielder Andrés Iniesta. In 2012 Spain won a victory in the European Football Championship again, having crushed in the final Italian national team with the score 4-0. In tennis, Spain became known thanks to Rafael Nadal, who won 19 Grand Slam tournaments and also became the winner of the Olympic Games -2008 in Beijing. In general, in the ordeal, Spanish national teams won the World Cups in Europe practically on all game sports. On soccer, basketball, water polo, field hockey, hockey on rollers, to handball, volleyball and the Davis Cup on tennis. Spanish national team on ice hockey acts in the second division of the World Cup. And in 2011 the national team played in the first division. The 5th place. The first division of the World Ice Hockey Championship with a Washer 2011. In spite of the fact that the climate of Spain corresponds to development of summer sports more, among representatives of winter types in Spain there are world-class outstanding athletes too. In particular, the single skater Javier Fernandez is a two-time world champion, and the numerous winner and the prize winner of the World Cup stages in snowboard cross Lucas Ajabar took the second place in this discipline on the House Championship of the Planet, which passed in March 2017 in Sierra Nevada. In honor of Spain, the asteroid 804. Spain opened in 1915 by the Spanish astronomer José Comas in Fabra Observatory near Barcelona is called in honor of the native land of the pioneer. Also far. Write comments. Read comments. Interesting people will tell interesting stories. All of good mood and good luck.